Yikes.
There you go.
Dennis, why don't we get started?
Okay. Good afternoon, I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 403rd Imagine Buffalo program and another virtual Imagine lecture hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature. I pronounce the acronym C-SAAHN, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, we're going to start with our speakers shortly, but first, a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted during our speakers presentation, which will last about 15 minutes or so. We will have time for questions at the end. If you do have a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. This program is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it again later on the library's Facebook and YouTube channels and share the link with your networks. As a reminder, we'll be here on Zoom, life willing, every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. with a great lineup of local speakers. Now, today is the second Tuesday, so our focus is on architecture and design, and our primary theme is Imagine Greater Buffalo as a premier cultural and nature center. Today's featured speaker is Dan Hart. Dan, in his 18th season as executive director of the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. Dan Hart works with music director Joanne Falletta, a dedicated board of trustees, an energetic 24-member staff, and the members of the orchestra to lead a $12 million creative enterprise that delivers exceptional content to the community through a diverse array of 120 concerts, reaching upwards of 200,000 people annually. He also serves as director of Kleinhans Music Hall, the National Historic Landmark building that has served as the home of the BPO since opening in 1940. Over the last decade, the BPO has toured both nationally, including at Carnegie Hall, and internationally, including Poland. Recently, the BPO recorded its highest subscription sales ever. The orchestra is nominated for 3 Grammy Awards this year. Hart's career has included training residencies in Cleveland, Colorado Springs, and Milwaukee, as well as director posts at Baton Rouge, Virginia, and Columbus. He has also served on committees of the League of American Orchestras and as a grant review panelist for multiple state councils on the arts. So now, let's welcome Dan Hart, who's going to talk today about Kleinhans Music Hall at 80. Dan?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be back here, and kudos to you and the library for continuing this series. I'm always excited to come and talk there, and I can't today. The reimagine or the Imagine Buffalo. I just can't imagine Buffalo without Kleinhans Music Hall. So it's a apropos time to talk about it. But I want to thank everybody for Zooming with us today and spending your lunch hour break to hear a little bit about Kleinhans. I just had yogurt and some Girl Scout cookies, so I hope you're in better shape than me. But I'm, and the sun is shining. I got vaccinated. I got a haircut for the first time in a year. So I'm super excited to join you and talk a little bit about Kleinhans. My trusty assistant, Diana, is trying to set up our slideshow here. So I'm sure that will be along in a second. Diana, are you in a position to share yet? Okay, here we go. And what I'm going to do a little bit of a preamble, but Diana's just going to walk you through a couple of the slides. Kleinhans is very photogenic building, and she's going to just walk you through some exterior and interior pictures while we start to go along. But as Dennis said, this is the 80th anniversary of Kleinhans Music Hall. I want to talk today a little bit about its history, and if time allows, we'll talk about the effect of the pandemic on Kleinhans and a little bit about our future. This time of year, talking about an 80th anniversary, I can't believe that the 75th anniversary was just 5 years ago. I mean, time flies. And at that point, it was a really high point in Kleinhans. We redid all the seating, we did carpeting, we got HVAC, and it's just hard to think that time goes by so quickly. And also this week, it's also hard to believe that this actually is the 1 year anniversary of the shutdown due to the pandemic. It was this coming Thursday, a year ago, that we got the word that the governor was shutting down all venues. And we were at Kleinhans with the Canadian comedy group Letterkenny. We had a sold out house. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the thing happened. And as soon as the word came out, the troupe just started packing up. We had literally done the load in. We're ready to do the show. People were showing up at the door. So it was just a, kind of a sad way to go out. But now on the 1 year anniversary, we're also excited because we've got guidance last week from the governor that, we're going to start to open up soon in a very limited capacity. So more about that later. But anyway, as Dennis said, I came to Buffalo in 2004. I came to be the executive director of the Buffalo Philharmonic. And I didn't know much about Kleinhans at the time. I must say I wasn't, at first glance, I wasn't overly impressed with the exterior. I love modern architecture. So, but over the years, it's just grown on me. And now that I'm the director of Kleinhans and have direct responsibility and stewardship for it, I mean, it's really one of the most rewarding aspects of my job. And I'm really excited about the plans we have to take to get Kleinhans ready for the next 80 years, I could say. One of the first things I'll tell you is that it's always kind of a burning question if people ask, who owns the building? And a lot of people assume that it's the BPO, but that's not the case. Kleinhans has always been a city-owned building. In 1940, when it opened, Kleinhans Music Hall Management was established as a nonprofit to run the hall through a lease for the city. And the BPO always, was a leasee of Kleinhans Management. But about 10 years ago, we realized that it probably made sense just for the organizations to combine. So we merged the operation into ours. And so that's how I got to be the director of the hall. It's complicated, but it works. And in addition to our board of directors, we're very grateful to the city of Buffalo, Mayor Brown, our council member, David Rivera, and all the people at Public Works that work with us on an ongoing basis to keep the hall going and for their financial support and petition of major projects. So what you're going to hear today is mostly from a presentation I did for the Buffalo Architectural Foundation about 4 years ago. And they have a program called 6 Minute Stories. You have to tell the story, a Buffalo story, in 6 minutes with 24 slides. And that was quite a challenge, as you can imagine. But I'm happy to have a little bit more time now. So the next part is going to talk a little bit about how Kleinhans came to be. And Diana, if you want to advance to that first slide. And, the story of Kleinhans is, I guess the longer you live in Buffalo, it's a small town. Everybody kind of knows each other. And there are stories abound about things. And the story of Kleinhans is one that is like a bit like an onion. You can just peel away the layers and find different things. I like to tell, when I do the tours of Kleinhans, I like to say that there are just a number of themes that are very present, that come out loud and clear when you hear the story. And among those themes would be love, family, a passion for music and community, the power of personal philanthropy, civic engagement and stewardship, the power of an individual voice, and also a nation in need, our great country. So here on this slide, you see the reliefs of Edwards and Mary Seton Kleinhans. And it was a true love story. They didn't have children. They came here from Chicago. They opened Kleinhans clothing store. And from all reports, they spent every day together having lunch. They took rides in the country after work. And they loved the music and the community. And when it came down to it, they were embarrassed by the state of the concert hall in Buffalo at that time, which was Elmwood Music Hall. So their wealth came from the clothing store, and Edward passed first in early of 1934. And Mary Seton passed just a few months later. I can't help but think of from a broken heart, because they loved each other so more. But they left their entire estate of about $750,000, and that was to be used for a new concert hall. So his will stated the following: I direct that the corpus be used to build and direct a suitable concert hall in memory of my beloved mother and wife. Such music hall shall be for the use, benefit, enjoyment, and enjoyment of the people of the city of Buffalo. Next slide. Yeah, the money then went to what was then the Buffalo Foundation, which was one of the few at the time community foundations that had been established in Buffalo for the benefit of the community. Now it's of course known as the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. And a core group of volunteers, many Buffalo names that you would recognize: George Rand, Phil Wixer, and especially Ed Letchworth, worked tirelessly for years to create the concert hall. So, I think that this is another aspect of the Buffalo story, the Kleinhans story, is that these people dedicated a good chunk of their lives to pursue the vision of Kleinhans and come up with the very, very best possible solution. And I would say that this, the sense of community and civic stewardship has really continued on through the years, over the decades of Kleinhans. And of course, I don't know, there's a lot of decades that I don't know about, but certainly in the last 2 decades, what I've been around, we've had great community leaders that have dedicated large parts of their life to Kleinhans, and that would include Wayne Wisbaum, rest in peace, Jim Newman, Catherine Schweitzer, Chris Brown, Marianne Cressy, and Bob Skirker, and people that work to raise money like Sarah Carney for it. So it is something that is truly a community gem, and people take pride of it and see it as a treasure. And it's just so rewarding to see that kind of involvement and the best, people working for the best possible situation for Kleinhans. So next slide, please. Yeah, so the one thing that the committee quickly realized was that $750,000 wasn't going to be enough to build a world-class concert hall. And so this is one of the great things of the timing is that, our nation was trying to recover from the Great Recession. They had the Public Works Administration and the Works Progress Administration. And so Letchworth and his committee lobbied Washington hard to get money. And ultimately, about $600,000 came from Washington to, and in echoing actually an earlier grant that helped start the BPO. So with the $750,000 from the Kleinhans estate and the $600,000 from PWA, they had about $1.3 million to start the work. And, if you think back on the time, not only was it amazing that a building was being considered coming out of the Great Depression, but also the fact that we were on the brink of another great world war, very troubling times for our country and our world. So the next slide here is a slide of a woman named Esther Link. And Esther was a school teacher who was involved in the committee. And this is what the theme of, I guess, the power of an individual voice, someone who speaks up and changes the course of history, so to speak. And what happened was that there is lots of designs. They had hired a construction firm of Kidd & Kidd to come up with designs for Kleinhans. And if you come on my tour in Kleinhans, sometimes you'll see many of the different variations. But Esther felt like if we wanted Buffalo to be speaking to the future, we needed to have architecture that looked forward and not back. And so the designs that they were considering were kind of the Beaux Arts style that would have been like the Albright Knox or the Science Museum or something like that. It would have been very much similar to that. But she had seen, or she had visited Finland in 1926 or something like that. And she'd seen the train station that was designed by Elio C-SAAHN. And C-SAAHN had gained some notoriety in America because of his involvement at Tanglewood and with the Boston Symphony and also the Chicago Tribune competition. So it was Esther that I think has to get credit for lobbying for the inclusion of the C-SAAHN, Elio C-SAAHN, and this truly, changed the course of the history. Next slide there is of Elio and Arrow, the son. So it's also a story about the bonds of family, father and son working together on a career. Elio came to the United States in 1923 because there was not work in Europe. He established an architectural practice in Michigan. Probably many of you are familiar with the Cranbrook Academy. Arrow, his son, went on to, who was small then, went on to study architecture at Yale University. And once he graduated, they founded a practice in Michigan in 1936. And so although another firm had been hired for the Kleinhans job, Kidd & Kidd, the C-SAAHNs were brought in to collaborate and consult, I guess. But, ultimately they got total design control over the building. And, it wasn't too long after that. I think Elio passed away in 1950 and Arrow maybe 1960, but Arrow went on to, do things like the St. Louis Arch, JFK and the Dulles airports, really iconic American architecture. The project for Kleinhans, they were I guess it's one of the biggest. It's not that they didn't work on lots of projects together, but from what my research says is that they were mostly smaller. So Kleinhans was maybe one of the largest things that they had done together. Next slide. So here is Kleinhans as it was coming up. It was kind of interesting to look at the sign there, Shapiro and Sons, Engineers and Contractors. And I think if you look at heating and ventilation, that's Quackenbush Company. So I think they're still around. But and then you see the big PWA Federal Works Agency sign there. Next slide. So here's a good view of the top. Kleinhans, I guess they broke ground in 1938. It opened to great fanfare in 1940. And Elio had lots of design concepts and an overall philosophy about the hall. And he said this: the shape of a violin is based on both musical and human qualifications. And as a concert auditorium to its inmost nature is a musical instrument, its formation must arrive accordingly. And so you look at this, and many people talk about it. I mean, some people have referenced it to be the auditorium being the inside of a piano. Most people relate to it as a cello or a violin shape. And it is one of the things that defines the building, along with some of the other kind of, I would guess, conceptual or architectural themes such as symmetry, nature, and soft lines. The hall is so important to the BPO. I mean, it's shaped our sound over these 80 years. And in fact, Joanne Fletta, our music director, refers to it as a member of the orchestra, the 74th member of the orchestra, because it's so important. So the next few slides are just going to be some exterior things. And, the thing that I didn't realize when I first got here until I started walking around it is that, Kleinhans can really surprise the viewer at nearly every angle. It is austere, but there is a graceful beauty in the lines and the formation of what the Saarinen accomplished. If you go back, Diana, to the last slide, to one more back to the overview. So you can see it's flat roofed. The brick is red and brick tan from Ohio, sandstone building. It's two elliptical, semi-elliptical structures housing the main performance venues. And the auditorium seated $3,000 people originally, and 800 in the chamber hall. There's also a third recital hall in the back of the theater. Next slide, and the next one, and the next one. This is a little bit of a weird shot, but this is kind of a detail of looking from Symphony Circle. A lot of people say, why did it end up? I mean, this was my first question. Why did the hall end up in a neighborhood like that? But there were lots of different options that they looked at over the years. They did look at parks, but after many options, this was chosen. It was the Avery Mansion. It was the heirs wanted to get rid of it, so they gave it to there. And it also was situated on the Frederick Law Olmsted Parkway system. So the natural setting is what really, I think, got Elio's attention, and seeing a building not too ostentatious, that was just kind of set back in that natural setting, that where he could really build a temple for music more than anything else. That was his ultimate consideration. The Chamber Music Hall, it's surrounded by a reflecting pool. It is named for Mary Seton. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. The exterior panel, which I don't have a good picture of though, is very interesting because it's panels of buff Mankato limestone, and it's got a fleur pattern in it. And it's decorative, but very subtle. But it's almost like large tapestries hanging on the wall. And then when you get inside the Mary Seton room, he actually echoes that, but with a different kind of zebra wood. So these are just kind of some of the themes that go throughout it. And Here you see an example of a grate, and this is just a design element, again, very simple. This could have come from folk art or arts and crafts embellishment, but this theme is on the outside of the building and in almost every place that you look. Next slide. The warmth of the hall really is kind of aided by a couple things: the lighting and the hallway. He separated the two concert halls by this great, spacious, comfortable lobby with curving lines, and that harmonizes the textures and details. And above the entrances to the auditorium, they introduced a cut glass pattern and lighting, and a choice that almost gives it a futuristic, streamlined look. Next slide, please. Once inside the main hall, the stage and the beautiful wood panels are enhanced by the same kind of unique lighting plan. The air returns over the balcony continue a kind of futuristic look. To me, they look like spaceships hovering over there. And although the hall is large, they have managed to give it a very intimate feel. Next slide. Eero, through his work at Yale, met Stanley McCandless, who was a lighting designer, very famous for Radio City Music Hall. So that's who was the lighting consultant on this project. He was engaged for Kleinhans, and he championed the concept of combining the architecture and lighting to unify an expression and to consolidate the building's formal themes. The next one is the stage ceiling. And to me, it's a work of art in itself. 5 gently curved spans of heavy plaster. They fan outward to the audience. And not only that, but the wood panels and the ridged ceilings were meant to ensure an even sound distribution. And that was a concept that was promoted by the acoustic consultant on the project, Charles Pop. Eero worked on the interiors, and I'm sorry that I don't have a couple slides of some of the more furniture, but he worked with Charles Ames and Ralph Rapson on furniture. They had met at Cranbrook Academy, and together they created a number of very interesting designs that combined sculptural shapes with his experiments in ergonomic support, some of the first of their kind with shaped plywood. Next slide is one of the things to me that's just, it's just beautiful. These are in black and white because I have a vintage view of it, but that the lines, the curves of the whole building are just worked to create beautiful abstractions nearly everywhere you look. It's gentle. They lead the eye around and around the volume spaces. There's not a single, corner in the whole building. And another unique aspect of it is the symmetry, is that if you're standing in the middle, you can pretty much fold the building over on its side and get the same thing. So all this uniqueness, the hall was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1982, and in 1989, it got national landmark status. Next one, Kleinhans has, it always had, it was an architectural and acoustic masterpiece, I guess you could say. And so here in my presentation, I switched the color because the color is what, for me, defines it and gives it its beauty. And so for over 8 decades now, we've had thousands and thousands of concerts. There's been millions and millions of visitors, and it's got wide public acclaim, critical acclaim. Richard Huntington, one of our critics, said that sight and sound are perfectly matched in Kleinhans. Next slide. So today, where are we today? Kleinhans easily sees 175 to 200,000 people per year. The resident groups include Buffalo Chamber Music Society, Art of Jazz, National Geographic Live, Just Buffalo Babel Series, as well as the BPO. And as I know from working here now for 18 years, a lot of people relate to Kleinhans only as the place where they had their high school graduation or college graduation. So it has truly been a tremendous community asset. And as I look at this picture, I think about, I wonder if Edward and Mary Seton were dancers, but I imagine that they would have got a big thrill out of seeing how the people in this photo are reacting to their hall. And I'm sure that they probably would have joined in the conga line. So finally, I'm gonna leave with a couple of quotes that I think are important. And these were delivered on the opening night. And one spoke to the government's need to help our country. And he said, this is the PWA director, he said, "This building is an excellent example of what the PWA has been doing since 1933 to rebuild the nation by the construction of useful and permanent public works operating in partnership with cities and counties and states. The workers of Buffalo and Erie County were provided with nearly 500,000 man-hours of employment and were paid over $600,000 in wages. So it was an important part of getting our community back on the ground. And I can't help now but think that our government is in the same position with us now, trying to restart the economy after this pandemic. But the most important quote that I have, and I will leave you, I can see the time is running, but I'll leave you with this. But this is what Ed Letchworth said on the opening night. He said, "The Kleinhans vision could not have been realized at a more opportune time. In a world gone mad with mechanized brute force rampant, we need more than ever the ennobling influence of beauty and culture and the things of the spirit if we are to remain sane human beings." And, again, echoing the situation that we're in now, the fact that Kleinhans has been dark has been, left a void for people. And the things that we have done visually have been very important to that, sense of sanity, I guess. So we'll be very happy to, get Kleinhans back going here in the next few months. And we look forward to seeing you there. In terms of some resources, kleinhansbuffalo.org. Here are a couple of websites that you can see. Explore Buffalo has a great tour from time to time, led by Lauren Becker, who did our archive room. If you're ever at Kleinhans and have time, she did a wonderful job telling the story of BPO, and you can see it. And then there's a couple other websites there that you can see. And finally, on the last slide, I think, the impact of the pandemic is what it is. Kleinhans at 80 years old does have a lot of things that need to be fixed. And the board right now is starting to prepare for a major capital campaign to really make sure that Kleinhans is going to be a world-class venue for the next 80 years. So I want to thank you for your time. Dennis, I'm sorry it took so long, but I'm happy to answer any questions that have come in or out there. Thanks again.
Well, Dan, that was outstanding. Thank you very much. Melissa, well, Dan, before we get the questions from the audience, one quick one. In both the United States, literally, and in the world, given a global depression in the 30s, there couldn't have been too many music halls built anywhere. This must be a very unique, from an architectural standpoint, a very unique building for the world to see as a global attraction, I would think, on its own merits, let alone the BPO. Yeah,
it's a good point, Dennis, and I can't think of another one. I mean, there are a lot of orchestras operate in old Lowe's theaters that were built in the early 20s or teens. Columbus does that. I mean, Shays was this kind of place. There's a lot of modern halls that have been built past the 60s and 70s. But yeah, this particular time, it's an oddity, a rarity, I guess, but one that has the vision of the Kleinhans and that board of people. I think they came out with a great result, and one that is can still speak a lot for Buffalo, and as a source of pride and cultural refinement for us. So
great, Melissa. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes, we have a couple so far. First question, I have seen many wonderful shows at Kleinhans, the BPO, Babel, Nutcracker, movies, etc. The best by far was James Taylor about 4 years ago. Any plans to bring someone like him back?
Oh, we're looking all the time for shows like that. Gordon Lightfoot is going to come back. The problem with a lot of the big rock stars is that they can fill 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 seats. So Kleinhans in that regard has become is at a disadvantage. But that James Taylor concert was one of the best I've ever seen because it was so intimate. So I wish we could find some more. But that is in stark contrast to the 60s and 70s. We did an exhibition of the cards. The shows were written on cards in the past. They were typed in there. And during the 60s and 70s, virtually every major rock band in the country came through Kleinhans. It is amazing legacy to see. But those days may be a little bit beyond us, but we'll still hold out for another James Taylor concert.
And another question, are there any plans to enhance parking?
I think that there's no good solution. I mean, that's the hard reality of it. We are doing our best with portable transporting people by buses. We have shuttles that run from Salvatore's in Williamsville. We have parking lots that are kind of close by, like Dewville, and we have shuttles that are running. Now that the BPO offices are here at the Red Cross Clement Mansion on Delaware, we'll have another space where people can park and that we can shuttle people across. But I don't, there's just no, the way that it is situated in the neighborhood, there is no way that we can really make a big impact. Even building up on the parking lot, I think would be not something that would be possible. There was a plan, in the archives at Kleinhans, there's a plan that was drawn up in 1958 that shows the blocks surrounding Kleinhans. They had the name of every owner and the value of the property, and it was titled the Kleinhans Parking Plan. And evidently it was a plan to raise the neighborhood to create more parking. So I guess that didn't go too far, but it would be interesting to go back and see the Common Council minutes of that presentation. I do also want to say that on this call, I see a number of friends, but one of the people who knows probably a lot more than Kleinhans about me is Denise Prince. And she has, in her thesis, doctorate thesis, written extremely important work about Kleinhans acoustics. So Denise, thank you for joining us today.
And there is another question, might be a little bit more digging required, but is there any record of Irene Dune in the play I Remember Mama in the Mary Seton room in the late 49s or 40s, perhaps that means?
That's a tough one. I can send Lauren Becker in search of that. But one of the things that we are working on, we'll continue to work on, is the rich history of Kleinhans. And the archive room that we have is a good starting point. That was funded by the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. But right now we're kind of on phase 2 because there is just so much information and interesting information. Like we could probably find the program book from that. I'm sure that we can. It would just be a matter of trying to do it. And then in this day and age, like the library is struggling with, what do you do with printed material, and how can it be accessible to more people, maybe through scanning or online digitalization, things like that. So, but please send me an email, dhart@bpo.org, and then I'll try to look for it.
Those are all the questions in the chat.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much. We're right on time. And again, Dan, thank you so much for creating this very important archival piece as well as live presentation. That's the purpose of this Imagine series. So folks, thank you for joining us today. A great crowd, great questions. Join us next week, same time, same Zoom link, when we will talk with Shane Stephenson about, and we've changed the title. The USS Sullivans has been in the news, so we're going to look at the history and future of the Buffalo and Erie County Naval and Military Park with an update on the USS Sullivans. From a timely standpoint, there'll be a major fundraiser the very next day, March 17th. And so we'll hope you tune in. I think you'll find that most interesting. We had Shane speak once before about the Sullivans. It's a fascinating story. I'm Dennis Galucki. See you next week. Be well and have a good day.